Title: The Terrifying Secret of the Forest. 10-year-old Emily set out with her family to take a vacation deep into the forest. The forest was silent and desolate. As they walked beneath the towering trees, they began to hear strange sounds. The rustles were unlike any noises that wild animals would make. Emily's heart began to race. The family continued walking deeper into the forest, but even stranger things began to happen. They lost their way and couldn't find the path back. The trees seemed to close in around them, turning their surroundings into a claustrophobic maze. In the blink of an eye, Emily lost sight of her family. She was alone in the depths of the forest. Emily continued to walk through the forest, and she finally stumbled upon a clearing. However, the clearing revealed a terrifying sight: an abandoned mental hospital. It appeared deserted, yet a faint light seeped through the windows. Approaching the hospital with curiosity, Emily heard the door creak open. A cold wind rushed out from inside. As Emily stepped in, the hallways were dark and silent. She cautiously proceeded, hearing strange sounds emanating from the rooms. Eventually, she reached a room with a solitary mirror. The room was empty, but the mirror held an unsettling surprise. As Emily gazed into it, her face began to change. Slowly, she transformed into a sinister figure. Her eyes turned red, and a malevolent smile spread across her face. Emily lost control of herself and began to wander the dark corridors of the mental hospital. At every turn, she encountered more horrifying scenes. The hospital resembled a labyrinth, and Emily felt as though she might never escape. Emily wandered through the dark corridors of the mental hospital, and she spotted a sign on the wall pointing to an exit. She quickly followed the sign and finally reached a door. When she opened it, she emerged into a garden bathed in light. Emily breathed a sigh of relief because she had escaped the terrifying hospital. However, at that moment, a shadow swiftly approached and captured her. With red eyes and a sinister grin, the kidnapper held Emily captive. Just as she was about to despair, she heard the voices of her family. Her family was running toward her. The kidnapper panicked as Emily's family closed in, and she was set free. She embraced her family, and together they fled from the mental hospital. But the events were not over. A few days later, when Emily looked in the mirror, her face had returned to normal. She remembered the events but began to think that the terrifying experiences in the forest and the mental hospital might have been a dream. Emily and her family, although appearing to have been lost in the depths of the forest, somehow made it back home. However, Emily now harbored a deep fear of the woods and vowed never to return to that desolate place. The story concludes here. Emily and her family survived, and they grew closer together after the harrowing experiences they went through. Title: The Dark Secret of the Lake. Silence enveloped the depths of the forest. 10-year-old Sarah had come to this desolate forest with her family for a weekend immersed in nature. The shadows of the trees seemed like strange figures within the forest, and the rustling of the wind was the only sound that disrupted the silence. Sarah noticed peculiar tracks on the ground as they walked. The tracks were irregular and larger than any animal could leave. As the sun disappeared from the sky, they lost their way within the forest. Sarah's heart began to race as the trees around them appeared to form a labyrinth. With her family, they took a deep breath and continued their journey. However, strange events began to unfold one after the other. While walking through the forest, they began to hear an eerie melody in the distance. The melody played hauntingly in their ears, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. They followed the melody, and finally, deep within the forest, they found a mesmerizing lake. The calm surface of the lake shimmered in the moonlight. However, something was amiss. When they reached the lake's edge, they noticed peculiar figures beneath the surface. Sarah realized that these figures were the remnants of an ancient temple. The temple had been hidden beneath the lake and had resurfaced as the waters receded. In the center of the lake, they saw a mysterious figure seated on an ancient throne. The figure appeared to rise from the depths of the sea and had an eerie smile fixed on Sarah. The figure began to speak in a strange language. Sarah and her family were horrified by this sight and quickly tried to move away. However, they felt as though the figure had hypnotized them with its melody. They found themselves circling the throne and repeating the figure's words. Suddenly, the waters of the lake began to rise and envelop them. The figure rose with a sinister grin and was drawn into the waters. Sarah and her family were dragged beneath the surface and disappeared. Several days later, by the lake's edge, a few people discovered their lifeless bodies. The fate of Sarah and her family remained uncertain, but those who found them realized that the dark lake held secrets beyond imagination. The story concludes here, with the mystery of the enigmatic figure and the strange powers of the lake remaining unsolved. Title: The Terrifying Secret of the House. In the depths of a desolate and silent forest, Mia and her family had come for a camping trip. The quietness of the forest, with the wind softly rustling the trees as they walked, was soothing. However, they began to hear strange sounds they had never heard before as they ventured deeper into the forest. Mia's heart started to race because these sounds were unlike anything that wild animals would make. As the family continued to journey deeper into the forest, they lost their way, unable to find the path back. The trees seemed to form a labyrinth, and strange shapes emerged within the forest. Suddenly, Mia lost sight of her family and found herself alone in the heart of the forest. Mia decided to keep walking through the forest and eventually stumbled upon a terrifying house. The house appeared neglected for years, with a cracked roof and a door left ajar. As she approached the door, she noticed it was open and cautiously entered. The house was dark and eerily silent. Old paintings on the walls and dusty furniture indicated that the place had been abandoned long ago. Mia continued to walk slowly and opened a few doors. At each step, she heard strange noises and spine-chilling laughter emanating from the rooms. Finally, Mia descended into the basement of the house, which was even darker and more unsettling. The walls were covered in strange symbols from ancient times. Mia opened a door in the basement and entered. The room was empty, but in the center there was a throne, and seated on it was a mysterious figure. The figure didn't reveal its face, but it started to approach Mia with a chilling voice. Mia noticed the figure was singing in a strange language, and the song was spine-tingling. Just as she was about to give in to despair, she heard the voices of her family. Her family was running toward her. The figure panicked and released Mia. She reunited with her family, and together they fled from the terrifying house. However, the story was far from over. A few days later, when Mia looked in the mirror, her face had returned to normal. But she began to remember the terrifying experiences in the house. Mia and her family, although they seemed lost in the depths of the forest, had made it back home. However, Mia could never forget the horrifying house and the dark secret it held. Mia and her family tried to leave their horrifying experiences behind after escaping from the house. However, Mia couldn't forget the nightmares she had lived through. She started having nightmares at night, feeling as if she could hear the eerie sounds of the house and believed that something was pursuing her. Her family noticed that Mia's condition was worsening as her fears were taking over her life. Soon, her behavior became increasingly peculiar. She frequently claimed to be inside the terrifying house, talking to herself. As Mia's condition deteriorated, her family realized that she needed professional help. They admitted her to a psychiatric hospital where she underwent treatment. However, the days spent in the hospital became a more horrifying experience for her. The hospital corridors were quiet and eerie, with the moans of other patients and the cold demeanor of the hospital staff intensifying her nightmares. As part of her treatment, Mia was forced to confront her fears and recount her experiences within the house. However, admitting that her story was real only plunged her into a more hopeless situation. Doctors insisted that the terrifying house in her mind was nothing but a product of her imagination, claiming it was not real. During her time in the psychiatric hospital, Mia became trapped in her terrifying nightmares and the dark secret of the house that still haunted her. Even after leaving the hospital, she couldn't forget the nightmares. Mia's story had dragged her into the dark world of a terrifying house and a psychiatric hospital with no way to escape. The story concludes here. Mia's nightmares continued to haunt her even during her treatment in the psychiatric hospital, and she was drawn deeper into a world of darkness.